This is Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. It's election season, and all this week I've been interviewing the most competitive candidates for mayor of Seattle ahead of the primary, which is August 5th. Ry Armstrong is an actor, union chair, co-director of the nonprofit Sustainable Seattle, and they would like your vote for Seattle mayor. Ry, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So first off, I want to give you the chance to give kind of your elevator pitch, your dating profile for voters. You're an actor who worked off Broadway for many years. You returned home to Seattle during COVID. You ran for the District 3 City Council seat when Kshama Sawant had decided not to run again. You lost handily in that race. Why are you running for mayor?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really see some great candidates in position 8 and position 9 supporting Dion Foster and Alexis Shays-Rink. And so I just didn't see anyone at the time stepping up on the timeline you need to build a campaign to challenge Bruce Harrell for mayor. To give a progressive challenge, I imagine, is what you're... Exactly, yeah. I saw an incumbent who was taking Jumpstart funds meant for affordable housing, small business development, and Green New Deal investment, and using that to fill a budget deficit. And I just thought that wasn't aligned with my values. And then some members of the queer community asked me to consider it. And then I really thought about it for about a month and then jumped in the race. I think we need a next generation of leadership, not only in the city, but in the country. And so why not be the face of that and stand up as a trans person in 2025, and say that we're not going to be erased? In terms of my elevator pitch about why voters should swipe right on on my dating profile.
Thank you for going with my metaphor. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I'm only on Tinder, by the way, so if anyone wants to find me, I am single. But I grew up in the city. I've seen it change for the better or the worse. My grandfather spent his whole life just filleting fish down in the waterfront. My grandmother was one of the first woman computer engineers at Boeing, the first woman to graduate from UW in aeronautical engineering. So my family ties are really strong in this region. And when I came back home from New York after the pandemic, I just really fell back in love with Seattle, and I want to see it continue to change. And I remember a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and we love to talk about our problems and think about them and orbit them, but we don't actually take the action that I wanted to see from real leadership in the city. So I'm stepping up because I think we need to build 1,000 units of shelter housing in the next 6 to 8 months. We have to start building shelter capacity. Second, I want to see the CARE team finally out of its pilot program. It's been in a pilot program for 3 years because of the MOU with SPOG.
The Seattle Police Officers Guild caps the number of CARE team members, which are the unarmed crisis response members, at 24, I think.
Yeah, it's 24 citywide, just became citywide. That's not enough to meet the moment. I've done police ride-alongs. I've talked to Amy Barden of the CARE team. They really want to expand and grow. There are medical studies to show that this will be the best way to have better public safety in the city, and also alleviate some of the pressure that's on current police officers. So I would love to see that 10x'd over the time I'm in office. And then finally, affordable childcare. On average, I think it's about $4,000 a month. That could be 1 or 2 kids depending on the family, but we don't have enough childcare centers in the city, and our land use laws going back to the 1970s have not really been updated to incentivize the development of more childcare centers. So it's only something really available for the richest and whitest in our community. And I want to see working families stay in Seattle with their kids so that we can have higher enrollment in schools and higher investment in those schools. So those are my top 3 issues I see facing Seattle. I've talked to about 12,000 voters so far. And a lot of people are afraid, but I just refuse to be afraid in 2025. And I think if we have some real courage, we can have some real change.
Let's get down to brass tacks about, really how you're going to fund things, because the city is facing an unexpected $240 million lower revenue projection over the next 2 years. In the past, as you mentioned, we've used the Jumpstart tax to kind of bridge things. There's a lot of uncertainty about the receipts for the Jumpstart tax, depending on economic conditions. There's also the issue of what it was originally passed to fund, what it's actually funding now. How do you think the city should handle that big projected budget deficit?
I think we have a lack of transparency on how nonprofit partners, or even within the city, is running. I would want to see more transparency and less siloing of communication between departments so we can find efficiencies in that government. So that means embracing new technology and actually like building out a city hall that works for 2025. I served on the LGBTQ commission for the city for 2 years. I never once got access to the Microsoft Teams accounts that we were supposed to have as commissioners of the city of Seattle because it just never happened. So that to me is unacceptable. And so I want to look at that bureaucracy. Second, though, I think a vacancy tax could be something really energizing for the city. We have to somehow structure it around the uniformity clauses of the state law. But I think you can do it in a way where it can generate millions and millions of dollars and incentivize people to not have pied-à-terres in the city, for corporations not just to have, I think we have 33 or 36% vacancy downtown. So all those empty spaces could have cheaper rents, could have businesses in them, and we could actually activate life back in the city. So a vacancy tax would be really interesting. The reality is that we are one of the most regressive tax places in the country, the bluest state with the most regressive tax. So it's really difficult, the tools that Olympia gives Seattle, to be able to handle the burden for the entire region. And so until we can someday maybe get an income tax that's progressive or have a progressive property tax, we are going to be fighting for these scraps and weird niche fill-in tax policies that are not going to ever be enough. So I would really love for our state government to look at what's happening with Medicaid cuts, what's happening nationally, and say, hey, we are not going to get federal funding. We have to take care of ourselves. Let's start having that conversation now before short session starts next year. And as mayor, I'd advocate for that.
Okay, homelessness has consistently ranked as a top concern for Seattle residents. Mayor Harrell has followed through on his promise to remove tents on sidewalks and parks. According to the Seattle Times, the city has removed encampments more than 5,000 times in its first 3 years, much higher rate of removals than we saw before the pandemic. Visible homelessness has been reduced in the city. At the same time, overall shelter bed capacity in the city has gone down during his term. Would you continue to remove encampments even if shelter space isn't available?
No, I don't believe that sweeping people around the city is actually fixing the problem. I think it's actually causing more harm for people who are down on their luck and trying to rebuild their lives. So I think if we can get those people into wraparound services and care, the new county crisis centers will be 5 of them across the county in the next couple of years. If we can really embrace actual capacity, then I would love to casework people and help them. Obviously, if they're a threat to themselves or others, or they're obstructing a small business, like that should not be happening on the streets. But I think the reality of what we're seeing is that people are being swept from 3rd and Pike, 3rd and Pine, and they're now at 12th and Jackson. And that these soap and soda laws are not allowing for people to have consistency of services. So I would love to see not pushing homeless people out into the neighborhoods just because we want to quote unquote activate downtown and clean it up. I think that's a little inhumane personally. So I would rather invest in a medical approach. There's a new drug called Sublocade, which is an injectable buprenorphine. There's a lot we can do in terms of scaling up our response to the fentanyl crisis. And as mayor, I'd want to see it get done.
How do you make Seattle more affordable, or at least address affordability issues in the city? Zillow says you need to earn $214,000 a year to afford to buy a house here. It blows my mind. You know, the affordability issue is top of mind for a lot of people here. How do you plan on tackling that?
We have one of the richest cities in the history of humanity. I think there are 56,000 liquid millionaires. 1 in 12 people you meet on the street is a millionaire in this city. And so I personally make $85K a year working at a nonprofit, running a nonprofit, $2.2 million nonprofit. So affordability is also the number one thing I've heard from voters. People want to be able to stay in the city and they don't feel like they can. So the way we do that is with progressive revenue and by finding and asking for the richest among us to pay their fair share, to invest back in Seattle. Instead of using Seattle as their place to call home and then not actually funding the services. If you look at New York City, $112 billion budget, different population, but Seattle, $8 billion budget. So you get what you pay for, in my opinion. And so if we want efficient, great government, we have to fund it. And I think the richest people can pay a little bit more to make that happen. And then I think we see more supply for rents going down. We see increased childcare centers. And then suddenly meeting that demand, prices could come down and things could be more affordable.
Is there a way to get more housing built in the city? And do you think that's the solution?
Well, if you look at Minneapolis and Austin, they actually increased their supply so much that their rents went down in the last couple of years. Like, everyone's looking at them being like, oh my gosh, how do they do that? They just built as much as they could, and they have the land to build out. We don't. We have water on either side and city limits. So I think for me, the comprehensive plan is really the way to build the kind of housing density we need. And that is a climate resilient future, is to build the kind of housing we're going to need for refugees who are moving up from the South when it's no longer, actually viable to live in Southern California in the next 40, 50 years. People are going to move up north. And we have to prepare Seattle for what that is going to be, because we'll be a haven for the future. But you can build housing by upgrading density, specifically around transit, making more urban centers. I think we have to balance that with our tree canopy, of course, but I think we have to build more and more housing, and we haven't been building it fast enough. So pre-approved design review, streamlining processes, making sure developers can continue to do it, and then intentionally incentivizing affordable housing, not just market rate.
What about the Trump administration and its effects on the city of Seattle? We've heard that the Trump administration is going after sanctuary cities, so-called sanctuary cities. They've sued Los Angeles. These are, cities that limit their cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. How would you prepare the city and approach this conflict with the federal government?
Well, if elected, I will have a target on my back, personally. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Seattle can stand for what it believes in and not be manipulated by a bully in the White House. I've dealt with bullies my entire life. So personally, I'm ready to take him on. Beyond that, I think there are a lot of legal ways we can fight back. I think even though it's a slow process, the court system is slowly winning against Trump. Not as fast as we want to see. And maybe not in the Supreme Court, but in the local courts, it's doing great. And I think the work that Nick Brown is doing at the state level is ingenious. And so I would want to empower that and hopefully work with a new city attorney in our city hall to make sure that we are in lockstep fighting against Trump. That may look like holding our federal taxes as a city in an escrow and not paying them to the federal government, because then we're not getting federal funding back. That might look like nonviolent direct action, where I am on the sidelines and I am right there side by side with voters and community at protests, standing for what we believe in. So that's the kind of mayor I'm going to be on the ground.
Public safety, obviously a big focus of Mayor Harrell. He's talked about trying to hire more police officers. They have, during his tenure, SPD added to the ranks. Last year, new hires outpaced separations for the first time since 2019. Police Chief Sean Barnes said in April that this year would include the biggest hiring year in the department's history. Crime has gone down during Harrell's tenure. Now, that's a national trend, not necessarily connected to police hiring directly. The mayor is touting successes in public safety on the campaign trail. What are your thoughts about his record and how you would do things differently?
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of Sean Barnes. I haven't met him yet, but from what he's been saying, I think he's potentially going to be a great asset to this city. I think specifically just our public safety systems are out of date. I spent 4 hours shadowing 911 call center. We have CSOs and care team, which are doing the same thing or duplicative. So there's a lot of old systems that have not been brought up to speed. So I would want to find efficiencies in those systems so that we can focus on the right response. I had done 2 police ride-alongs. I've spoken to police officers. I think we have a system of people working crazy overtime, cortisol-driven levels, or who are young and inexperienced on the force, out there patrolling our streets and doing 7 jobs as one. So I think the real solution to that is to increase that care team to have an alternative response. We're never going to be able to hire the number of police officers that are needed to have an appropriate public safety response in today's world. It just, you can throw millions and millions of dollars and $75,000 bonuses, but the marketing will not equate to more safety. Instead, the system, I think, needs to be adjusted, and that's what I'd want to innovate in office.
Bruce Harrell is running for a second term, and he's talked about, again, hiring police officers. He's said he's really focused on bringing back downtown from the COVID pandemic, tackling entrenched issues like homelessness and affordability. You would come to this job in big contrast with the current mayor, who has been on the city council before. He's been in public office for many years. This would be your first elected office, at the government level. How do you think you would approach things differently?
I think it's an accessibility thing. I want to be a mayor people can make an appointment with, have a Zoom call with, or just see out in the streets. And I just don't see, until the last 6 months when he was running for re-election, I haven't seen that from Bruce Harrell. I'm the only other candidate in the field who has any elected experience, and that's on my national council of my union. So I oversee 50,000 members, and we oversee a $75 million budget. So in terms of the $250 million budget crisis that's coming up, I feel very well adapted and experienced to surround myself with an amazing team to take on that crisis. But mostly, I think we just need new leadership. I think we need someone who's going to come in with new ideas and not be afraid of failure and not stick around. I think, Bruce Harrell has really, it's hard to say, but he's kind of navigated this middle ground where we end up doing nothing. And that to me is still a choice. And so I want us to take bold action to meet the moment of today, instead of pandering to both sides to a point where, it's great politics, but I don't think it's good governance.
Anything else you want to add in closing for folks who are thinking about where to put their vote or their democracy voucher?
Yeah, we're the only campaign that can still accept democracy vouchers in this race. Only 5% of the city has sent them in. So please do so if you still have them at home, or you can go on our website and fill it out. It'll help fund the campaign. I think if you want some real change in this city, I am the candidate to bring that leadership right here to City Hall. You saw massive changes in New York City with Zohran Mamdani. I am prepared to take that up right here in Seattle and be that next generation of leadership. The mayor of Seattle is a superdelegate to the DNC. So if you want to make some real change on the national level, let's put a spokesperson in office to make that change. So that would be my pitch to the people of Seattle. But you can call our campaign at 206-657-6287 anytime, and I answer and return every call.
You answer and return every call?
If it goes to voicemail, I do call back. Yeah.
Okay. Ry Armstrong, actor, union chair, and candidate for Seattle mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did speak to all of the top 4 fundraising candidates in the Seattle mayor's race. The interviews were all recorded the week of July 14th. And the conversations are available to listen to now on the Soundside podcast. Anywhere you get your podcasts, search for Soundside. Also over at KUOW.org. And you can also check out the Sound Politics podcast feed. That's where we have a full breakdown of the race issue by issue. Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.